Well, good afternoon. Bon après-midi. I want to thank the Ombudsman for his report and thoughtful recommendations regarding segregation in Ontario's correctional institutions. J'aimerais remercier l'Ombudsman pour son rapport et ses recommandations concernant la ségrégation dans les établissements correctionnels de l'Ontario. The issues raised by the Ombudsman are deeply concerning and completely unacceptable. We must do better. I am committed to addressing each of the Ombudsman's recommendations and reporting back on our progress at 6 months interval until his recommendations are fully implemented. Les questions soulevées par l'Ombudsman sont profondément préoccupantes et totalement inacceptables. Nous devons faire mieux. Je me suis engagée à répondre à chacune des recommandations de l'Ombudsman et à faire rapport sur nos progrès à des intervalles de 6 mois jusqu'à ce que ces recommandations soient pleinement mises en œuvre. We have taken strong action by appointing Mr. Howard Sapers, the former Correctional Investigator of Canada, as an independent advisor on correction reforms to provide advice on the use of segregation and ways that we can improve the province adults' correctional system. This report will be released in May. We have already started broad reform on the correctional system. Last fall, we limited the number of consecutive days someone can spend in disciplinary segregation and established weekly segregation review committee at each institution. The care in placement function in our database now tracks the amount of time an inmate spends in segregation, and this new tool has been deployed and is in use province-wide. Nous avons déjà commencé une vaste réforme du système correctionnel. L'automne dernier, nous avons limité le nombre de jours consécutifs que quelqu'un peut passer en isolement disciplinaire et nous avons établi des comités hebdomadaires d'examen de la ségrégation dans chaque établissement. La fonction Care in Placement dans notre base de données suit maintenant le temps passé par un détenu en isolement et ce nouvel outil a été déployé et est utilisé dans toute la province. We've hired an additional 239 staff, including dedicated segregation managers, and deployed them to priority institutions to help reduce the use of segregation and supports inmates as they key transition back to general population. On the 239 new staff, 22 were nurses, 22 were mental health nurses, 22 were social workers, 32 were recreation staff, and 8 were psychologists. All important investments that are improving the mental health of Ontario's inmates. The recommendation provided by both the Ombudsman and Mr. Sapers' interim report will support our ongoing work and will help guide us in key areas, including developing a clear definition of segregation that is based on condition of confinement, ensuring appropriate and effective review mechanism for those held in segregation, improving our policies and procedures on segregation, but also ensuring consistent implementation of policies and procedures across the system. We're also modernizing our technology and improving data collection, reporting, and analysis, and implementing a robust oversight of the use of segregation. Nous nous sommes engagés à protéger les droits de l'homme et à assurer la sécurité de ceux qui sont placés sur notre garde et nos soins, et à maintenir la sécurité de nos institutions, tant pour le personnel que pour les détenus. Je reconnais le travail acharné que nos agents correctionnels font tous les jours pour garder nos institutions et nos détenus en sécurité. La sécurité et le bien-être de tous les Ontariens et Ontariennes sont une priorité absolue pour notre gouvernement. Le rapport de l'Ombudsman et le rapport intermédiaire de M. Sapers aideront à apporter des améliorations significatives et durables à nos politiques de ségrégation et à notre système correctionnel dans son ensemble. We are committed to safeguarding human rights and ensuring the safety of those placed in our custody and care, and maintaining the security of our institutions for both staff and inmates. I want to recognize the hard work our correctional officers do every day to keep our institutions and our inmates safe. And the safety, security, and well-being of all Ontarians is a top priority for our government. The Ombudsman's report, along with Mr. Saper's interim report, will inform our efforts to make meaningful and lasting improvement to our segregation policies, specifically, and to our correctional system as a whole. And I'm happy to take your question. Je suis très heureuse de prendre vos questions.
What sort of disciplinary measures do you think should be in place for inmates who create heinous crimes while behind bars, for example, murdering other inmates?
Well, as we are seeking to ensure safety and the well-being of all, including our inmates and our staff, I think it's important that this is taken into consideration in the sense of ensuring the safety of all.
Two alleged murders that have happened, and there's a huge discrepancy with how long these individuals have been behind bars. So we've got one individual who's currently at Southwest who allegedly killed his cellmate, who has spent the past nearly 4 years in segregation. We have another individual who in January allegedly killed his cellmate in Toronto South. His segregation records, his placement in care, actually indicates he only had 11 days in segregation. So which sort of philosophy should we be following here? That we should be reducing use? What do we do with these individuals who allegedly kill their cellmates?
Well, as you know, I cannot talk on specific of any inmate situation. I think as a broad approach, we want to make sure that segregation is used as a last resort. We also need to define segregation. We also need to ensure that we track and use those the tools that we would have to better understand. Again, I don't think it's my position to discuss individual situation within the operation of our institutions. My role is to ensure that both the inmates and our staff are safe and their well-being is protected. So for me, it's more the overall reform that we understand segregation needs to be looked into in a very large way. That's why we've hired our Mr. Sapers to help us. We appreciate the Ombudsman who clearly highlight some of those recommendations that we are acknowledging today and saying these certain aspect is completely unacceptable. But at the same time, we realize some of the I would say the more logistic approach that are the day-to-day operation of our institution. For me, it's to make sure that segregation is used as a last resort, but at the same time, that we understand why, if it's used for the right reason.
Are you looking at creating other disciplinary measures? Creating almost jails within jails for inmates that do pose a risk to themselves or others?
When I look at the correctional reform and my small time within this ministry, the comprehensive approach of a correctional system is based on utilizing the great work that our correctional officers are to ensure that our inmates are able to be rehabilitated and reinserted into back our community. And I think that's important aspect that we need to look into as we are moving as part of those recommendations. Today, it's definitely about the Ombudsman, and I think he did acknowledge that we are taking action on some of his recommendations, but at the same time, we need to do more and better, and I look forward for Mr. Saper's report to be shared with you in May.
Actuellement, on a recours à l'isolement. Quand est-ce qu'on a recours à l'isolement? C'est quoi la procédure à suivre actuellement?
Bien, il y a des procédures dans le sens qu'on a mis des politiques en place pour 15 jours maximum au niveau de la discipline. On a aussi au niveau de l'isolement administratif. Donc, c'est un petit peu la perspective qui est soulevée aujourd'hui au niveau des définitions de l'isolement. Nous avons réduit l'isolement disciplinaire de 30 jours à 15 jours récemment. Nous avons aussi embauché du personnel pour nous aider à voir les raisons pourquoi qu'un détenu et se retrouvent dans l'isolement. Puis en même temps, il faut vraiment utiliser, on a une procédure qui dit 5 jours, 15 jours, etc. Donc, de développer un mécanisme pour vraiment avoir un rapport, de rapporter l'information pour faire certain que la personne qui se retrouve en isolement n'est pas oubliée, mais par la même occasion qu'on prend le temps de regarder. C'est pour ça que le comité qui refait la revue de nos détenus en isolement de façon hebdomadaire est très importante parce qu'on veut que cette équipe multi-professionnelle puisse nous aider, puisse aider le retour en population générale de nos détenus.
Est-ce qu'on a vraiment recours à l'isolement en dernier recours en ce moment?
Écoutez, c'est vraiment le but, c'est vraiment ce qu'on souhaite. C'est certain qu'il y a des défis, puis c'est pour ça que nous avons demandé à M. Sapers de nous aider avec ses recommandations pour vraiment revoir. C'est certain que l'isolement devrait être considéré, et c'était une des politiques qui avait été annoncée, le dernier recours, mais en même temps, il faut aussi protéger soit le détenu ou les gens alentours d'autres détenus et nos agents correctionnels et notre personnel. Nous avons embauché des gérants, des directeurs pour l'isolement qui vont nous aider encore une fois à revoir nos dossiers pour vraiment comprendre et comment on peut les réinsérer dans la population générale.
Donc, il y a d'autres mesures qui vont être annoncées, évidemment, si on veut avoir recours à
Écoutez, j'attends de vous partager le rapport de M. Sapers en mai prochain et ça va faire partie du rapport intérimaire qui fait un suivi du rapport du Ombudsman et de plusieurs experts qui nous dit qu'il est important que l'Ontario qu'on fasse une réforme correctionnelle et c'est ce qu'on s'engage à faire.
The Ombudsman said that your ministry has known about these problems for years, and he acknowledged that you have been taking action. The reforms that came last fall said little concrete action has been taken. I mean, what's taking so long?
Well, you know, I want to say that I'm very pleased to the fact that we are making and we're taking action. We recognize that more need to be done, and that's why we've hired Mr. Howard Sapers to help us with recommendation when it comes to reforming a comprehensive correction reform. And his interim report will, I would like to think, and we'll be sharing in May, to continue some of the work that we've been doing. So today, I think it's important to say that I think more needs to be done. I agree. And we've done some measures, and like you said, it was recommended with the Ombudsman, but we need to do more. And we're looking forward to hear Mr. Sapers' recommendation and our action plan on his recommendation.
Has Howard Sapers recommended capping administrative segregation?
Again, this will be shared in May with all of you.
You must have been taking a look at the report, reading it now, right? Before it's being released?
This is, you know, I want, and I think our ministry has committed already to make some significant change. And we have hired 239 new new staff member, as I highlighted earlier. We are doing weekly segregation review. We're also bringing a management segregation into the equation. And we're looking at the care in placement to understand exactly how long each individual in our institutions are in segregation. The ultimate goal for us is definitely to move in a broader way of when I think about the definition of segregation. I think that's one thing that we're hoping as we follow up on the recommendation of Mr. Sapers and what I'm hearing about the reports from the Ombudsman, that we need to also look at potential legislation. So those are tasks, and more will be shared with you upon in May.
Sir?
Why is it that the ministry doesn't have a clear, consistent definition for segregation already? Isn't it kind of basic?
Well, I think we have a definition, but it's an act that's not been reviewed for a fairly long time, and we've put policies in place in the past few years, and now I would say that I'm committed to looking into. I would say more than a review, actually. It's to commit to look at a new legislation that will help us, as part of this new legislation, to the definition of segregation and, what it means today in 2017.
Minister, when you look at the problem, the timeline of the problem, this has been happening for years. There was people blowing the whistles. The alarm bells have been going off for a long time. Ombudsman, this is a second time addressing this in a report. Why are you just kicking this down the road? This is just, but that's all. You might think it's funny,
no,
but
it's not
there's
funny.
People that are in segregation that are their human rights are being violated, and you're kicking this can down the road with another report. Why aren't you acting?
Actually, we've acted. We've hired Mr. Howard Sapert. We've hired 239 new staff. We also are doing weekly review of the segregation, which was not taking place. We've also changed the disciplinary segregation from 30 days to 15 days. And as I said, we should do more, and that's why we're committed, and I'm committed to do, with my ministry, to move on those recommendations, which will be an interval of 6 months, and until all recommendations are implemented.
When you violate someone's human rights, you expose yourself to lawsuits, whether you're in any form of government. How many lawsuits do you know of, or have you been notice of, as a result of people having their rights violated?
I don't.
Now that you're kicking it down the can down the road, how many more do you expect to make prisoners seek financial compensation?
Yeah, the safety and well-being of our inmates is what's most important. I don't have, and to be fair, I wouldn't want to share any individual cases. Unfortunately, I cannot.
How many lawsuits do you believe are out there that you've been served notice of?
I really don't have any numbers to share with you today.
Je vais vous poser la même question en français. Pourquoi est-ce que ça a pris autant de temps justement avant de mettre en place les dernières mesures que vous avez mises? Et pourquoi est-ce qu'on n'en est pas encore à une définition claire de l'isolement?
C'est une importante question. Je pense qu'il y a eu quand même un engagement du gouvernement dans les dernières années au niveau de nouvelles politiques, de nouveaux engagements au niveau d'améliorer les situations au niveau des infrastructures, au niveau aussi de regarder l'embauche de gens clés comme des infirmières qui travaillent avec des dossiers de santé mentale, des infirmières spécialisées en santé mentale. On a aussi une équipe qui revoit l'isolement de façon hebdomadaire. Écoutez, il y a quand même un engagement de notre part, et c'est pour ça aussi, et l'engagement est par rapport à M. Sapers qui va nous aider avec la réforme correctionnelle, d'avoir une meilleure compréhension pour être un leader en Ontario au niveau non seulement de l'isolement, je vous dirais, mais au niveau de notre système correctionnel en entier.
Comment est-ce que vous justifiez des cas comme celui d'Adam Capé? Comment vous justifiez le cas d'Adam Capé?
Mais comme on a dit, et je pense que ça a été mentionné, je ne peux pas parler personnellement sur un dossier particulier. Pour moi, c'est très important que la sécurité, les droits de nos détenus sont importants, les droits humains. Nous devons faire mieux et nous nous engageons à faire mieux aujourd'hui et aussi avec l'embauche et le rapport qui va être imminent en mai de M. Sapers.
Do you know if Adam Capé or any other inmates have been in segregation for longer than he was?
Again, I cannot really say. What I will say is that segregation should be used as a last resort. We feel, and I feel, and our ministry feels very strong about that. At the same time, we want to protect inmates and our staff within our institutions. We are We've made a decision in terms of hiring individual to help us. When you think about nurses, nurse specialty with our mental health component, when you think about social workers, it's really to help that multidisciplinary team approach, our recreation staff, to support individuals who are experiencing difficulties within our institutions and to help them integrate a general population.
Follow up on Sabrina's question. Are you looking to cap administrative segregation?
As I say, we are going to have more to say based on the interim report that Mr. Saper for us is to look at all aspects. Segregation should be used as a last resort, and we want our correctional officers and the multidisciplinary team every day to work together to help inmates not have to use segregation. And some inmates is to protect, they feel that they need that protection. Some inmates, it's because we feel that they may be at risk. But as we are reforming, when you look at where we would like to be in Ontario when it comes to correctional system and the service that we can provide, I think we can do better. And I look forward to sharing the reports of Mr. Sapers with you.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.